Over the last 2 days, I have told you about the miracle Jesus performed to the largest group of people at one go. That is, the feeding of 5,000 men to their fill with only 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And I promised to tell you about yet another miracle that really built my confidence in Jesus and have my fear start to disappear. The miracle happened almost immediately after the feeding of 5,000 men. Interestingly, the next miracle that Jesus performed was witnessed by a very small group of his close friends. But even though the thousands of people who had just been fed did not witness the miracle happen, they witnessed that it actually did happen because of what happened before it happened and after it happened. This is what happened. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, feeding 5,000 men with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, they began to say, "Surely, this is the prophet who is to come into the world." And they started talking about making him their king. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. People followed them, expecting Jesus would join them in the boat. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. But the disciples, looking determined, rowed the boat in the general direction of Capernaum, the biggest town in Galilee. Everyone wondered why they would risk their lives by taking the boat into such a turbulent lake while they could simply stay and wait for Jesus. They must have looked very ungrateful to be leaving Jesus behind after he had fed them. But the people let them go, opting to wait for Jesus where they were. Having had their dinner provided for to their full, they made themselves comfortable by the lake shore, hopefully waiting for Jesus to bring them breakfast in the morning. In the meantime, later that night, the boat that the disciples had boarded was still struggling to make its way to Capernaum. And Jesus was alone on the land. Jesus, however, saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind in the lake was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost!" they cried, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." One of his disciples, called Simon Peter, said to him, "Lord, if it is you, tell me to come to you on the water." To which Jesus replied, "Come." Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began sinking. Then he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said to him, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." They were completely amazed, and the danger was over. The disciple who told this story to me mentioned how they had not understood about the loaves that Jesus had fed people with and thought it was just another good miracle to help people with their hunger problems. He told me that their hearts were hardened and could not understand the miracle of feeding people with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. But as Jesus got into the boat and the wind ceased, they were totally amazed, especially because their lack of understanding and hardened hearts had not stopped Jesus from coming out to help them. Now, back to the shore where people were waiting for breakfast. When morning of the next day came, the crowd that had stayed on the opposite shore of the lake realized that only one boat had been there, and that Jesus had not entered it with his disciples. The disciples had rolled away alone. Then some boats from Tiberias landed near the place where the people had eaten the bread after Jesus had given thanks. Once the crowd realized that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into the boats and went to Capernaum in search of Jesus. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Then 3 of the disciples who were in the boat that received him told them how Jesus had walked on water and joined them in the boat right in the middle of the lake. Wow! And the people believed it because they were there when the boat left with the disciples and Jesus was not there. By Jesus walking on water, he showed himself to be in command of natural elements, something only God can do. This miracle of Jesus, more than any other, convinced the people and even I, Nicodemus, that he was truly the Son of God. My fear was gone. My fear was completely gone. And tomorrow, I will share with you how, for the very first time, I stood on a point of order in the Sanhedrin in defense of Jesus. For truly, he who walked on water was the Son of God, and my fear was gone.